from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Welcome to Pathways to Pediatrics, a special series of Pediatrics on Call. I'm Dr. David Hill.
And I'm Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. In Pathways to Pediatrics, we get to meet people in our profession and find out how they got to and through pediatrics.
It's our way of shining light on the achievement of others and offering some inspiration.
David, there's no question that this country is getting more diverse.
Joanna, you and our long-term listeners know how nerdy I am, so I'm going to put your comment in the context of our pediatric population. When you look at U.S. Census Bureau statistics from 2020, children who are identified as non-white increased from 39 to 50% of the U.S. child population.
And I think we can assume that number will get higher in 2030. Our pediatric workforce is also going to have to evolve so that we represent the children we are seeing.
There are incredible pediatricians who are dedicated to health equity and providing mentorship to Black and brown medical students who want to enter pediatrics. We have one of those people on the show today, Dr. Chineze Ebo.
She is here to tell us her story, but she's different from our usual guests because she's still in training. Dr. Ebo is currently a pediatric endocrinology fellow at Cincinnati Children's Medical Center and is the co-founder of Next Gen Peds, which works to provide mentorship to medical students who are underrepresented in medicine. Dr. Ebo, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Chi, you grew up in the United States, but your parents were from Nigeria. Were they influential in your becoming a doctor?
Absolutely. So my mom is actually a physician. She's an OBGYN. And while both my parents are Nigerian immigrants, so my dad moved here when he was a young adult and my mom shortly thereafter. But before then, she was actually training and doing her medical schooling in Ireland. She had done boarding school in England and then went to Ireland to do her medical schooling. And so I already kind of been exposed to medicine through her, but it was very much so more in the eyes of like my mom, you know, the doctor who's always busy and having to run off to deliveries. I think I got a lot more exposure as a teenager when I started doing more volunteer work with her and actually being able to see kind of the more hands-on things that she was doing with her patients when I was able to shadow. So that definitely got me interested in medicine for sure. And also just kind of knowing where they came from. I, grew up in a very traditional Nigerian household where we were taught to work hard and ensure that we, prioritize education. But my parents also talked a lot about their interactions with the healthcare system, both in Nigeria and when they first came to this country. And just understanding a lot of the health equity issues that they faced really helped to propel my interest in not just medicine, but also trying to address some of the health disparities.
And I love that you were talking so much about your mother, another strong woman in medicine, because here you are. You're working toward being an attending pediatric endocrinologist, and you've already accomplished so much. Yet as a woman, and particularly a woman of color, you might be confronted with this concept of imposter syndrome. And I, for one, think it's less of a syndrome and more of a symptom of systems not made for women to advance. But how do you overcome that concept?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think it's something that I'm honestly still working at. It's so hard to rid of that feeling. I think one of the biggest things that's helped me at least help navigate imposter syndrome is remembering to give myself, a pat on the back, give myself kudos for things that I've already accomplished. I think when you're in medicine, it is so easy to always be looking forward at the next step. When you are a pre-med and you're applying to medical school and you're taking the MCAT and you're worried about getting in and then you finally get into medical school and then you're worried about taking your boards exams to get into residency. And it just feels like it's kind of this never-ending ladder that you're trying to climb. And I think we in medicine just get really stuck in always looking ahead instead of kind of paying attention and embracing where we're currently at. And I think that kind of adds to the imposter syndrome, the feeling of, did I do enough to get to where I am? Am I enough to get to where I need to be? And I think really taking some time to pause and just embrace where you're at in the process. There was a point in time where you prayed, you were crying, you wanted to be in the current position you're in. And so take the time to bask in that. Enjoy the fact that, hey, I've made it this far. Hey, I got into medical school. That's a big feat. Or I got into residency. I'm going to be doing what I want to do now. I'm in fellowship. I got extra training in something that I'm really passionate about. I think at every step, And there's so many steps, it feels almost like never ending. But at every step, there's such a need to continue to celebrate your accomplishments, celebrate those around you who have made those accomplishments. Even if you feel like you've failed in whatever aspect whatever that means to you, recognizing that there's always some sort of lesson to be learned from that. I will say that my journey was not straightforward at all. I was a non-traditional applicant to medical school. I had to apply twice. I took the MCAT multiple times. If you would have told the younger version of me that I would be where I'm at today, it would have been hard for me to see that. And so I think a lot of this path is also just recognizing that, delay does not mean denial. And also recognizing that there's a lesson in everything that you go through, good or bad. And I think when you start to embrace those things, that helps to alleviate imposter syndrome. Do I have the best solution on how to completely get rid of it? Absolutely not. If someone does, would love to hear it. But I think where I'm at right now is embracing that this is kind of a natural part of this process in being in medicine and realistically any sort of field that requires kind of these constant demands and these constant rules of progression. But there are ways to mediate it. And I think it's also important to use that knowledge to speak into the lives of those coming behind you.
So, Chi, you mentioned that you had to take the MCAT multiple times, that this was not a straightforward path for you. Do you mind going more into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Cornell University for undergrad and I was a psychology major. I had taken some pre-med classes, but not enough to go straight to medical school. And so after completing college, I ended up enrolling in a post-bac program to help me complete those science classes and enhance my application to medical school. While I did well in the post-bac program, I really struggled with the MCAT. I'm not the best at standardized tests. And it was something that really felt very defeating at the moment because I would always feel like I was studying appropriately and had had the resources needed, but always kind of felt like I fell short when it came to actual test time. And so I did have to take the MCAT a couple of times and even applied to medical school a couple of times because I didn't get in the first time. But I think this is why I emphasize delay does not mean denial, because there were so many lessons that came from having to kind of do these things over, whether it was taking the MCAT and picking up strategies on how to study that I then applied for when I was in medical school, or having to reapply to medical school again and using that gap year to actually do activities that actually enhanced my application, but also made me a stronger applicant for medical school and applying skills that I learned in jobs that I had during that gap year. For instance, I was a medical scribe, learned how to interact with patients, learned how to get a good H&P, enhance my bedside manner. And in that, I think those skills that I got in that year were things that I wasn't going to get in the first year of medical school. So I came in already fairly strong and skilled, because of the experiences I had in that year that I had to reapply. So for me, while I did have those struggles, while my path wasn't straightforward, there were lessons learned and experiences that I obtained during kind of those struggle years that I actually was able to apply and helped me be successful in medical school. So I always encourage everybody who's kind of going through that process and just needs reassurance that things are going to be okay, to not look at the things that are delaying you, to not look at these things that seem like challenges or obstacles as negatives, but trying to use them in ways that can help to boost you up and help you be more successful in the future.
Well, speaking of boosting up, you and I have something in common, which is our love of comedy. In what ways do you use laughter in your career?
Honestly, I enjoy being a clown. I think that if you don't find the humor and you're not laughing about things, that it can be very draining. Life is hard. There's a lot of things happening that can really be kind of saddening, draining, exhausting. And I think you have to balance it out. You have to be able to pull yourself out of these situations where sometimes laughter is the best medicine. For me, I like to joke about things. And obviously in the context, serious conversations weren't serious, a level of seriousness. But I think honestly, being able to go to a comedy show. In college, I was part of an improv comedy sketch group called Humor Us. And I really loved being a part of that because we're just goofy, just acting, just being able to be silly. I am the oldest of 4 girls and my siblings we're all very similar. So we can all joke. We make goofy TikToks, just things that help to de-stress. So I definitely understand and recognize the importance of just laughter, or at least having a good balance just from a mental health perspective.
I want to say yes and start just like a whole skit with you and David and me. But
Did all the members of Humorous go on to be orthopedic surgeons? That's what I would.
You know what? I actually should follow up and see where they ended up. I was on it for a year and then graduated. But yeah, it was a good time.
I do want to talk about, because you've mentioned it a few times, though, how passionate you are about health equity. And in your bio, we kind of said you formed this mentorship program, Next Gen Peds. Why did you and your co-creators do this?
Yeah. So this was an organization that actually came out of COVID. And so in 2020, there was a lot of shifting of the traditional residency application process to make it a more virtual-based application system. And one of my other co-founders, Rebecca Fenton, we had been discussing about how this process is already difficult to begin with. And especially as an underrepresented minority who you might not necessarily have the mentorship or the advocacy, especially of those who look like you in this process. So for a process that's already difficult and then now shifting to a completely new way of doing it, a way that in some aspects, kind of it has like a risk benefit profile where there are some things that are great about the virtual process in terms of access and being able to, reduce costs, but also you kind of lose the ability to have those in-person conversations. And so what would that look like? And especially for an underrepresented minority who might not necessarily have all those additional resources. And so the conversation was really about, okay, well, how do we enhance this process for URMs? How do we provide mentorship and support and guidance in a already stressful period of time that is now about to be more confusing? And that is where Next Gen Peds had its start. It's funny because we did not realize what we were creating when we started. It started off as joining a group me that was dedicated to URM students who were applying to pediatrics. And we were in that chat and they had a lot of questions. And we were like, you know what, let's just jump on a Zoom call and try to address this in a more meaningful and productive way. So we got on a Zoom call with, about, I think at the time, 50 applicants were on the call for the initial talk. And we answered questions and we were like, we could maybe do this. We could make this maybe a monthly thing or in some frequency where we're able to continue answering questions, help you guys with preparing your application, help you with interviews, talk through just having a safe space for you guys to vent about the application process. And so we, grabbed some of our other colleagues, there were 5 of us, and essentially kind of formed this mentorship panel where we created kind of like a curriculum. So PowerPoint slides that were geared towards different sections of the application process, whether it was personal statement, prepping for the interviews, how to communicate with program leadership when you're awaiting interviews or, after an interview, what to do post-interview, how to create your rank list, and then even a talk about, okay, you've matched, what does preparing for intern year look like? And so we were able to develop that and kind of walk through the process with these applicants. And we've had a really successful rate of our applicants matching into pediatric programs. Like 98 to 100% majority of the years that we've been doing this for almost 5 years. And it's been just a very joyful organization to be part of because of the impact that we're having. I think even outside of the application, things that we're helping these applicants with, just being a source of support and guidance, just being able to cheer them on, or just being a space for us to just have conversations about the real things that are happening, especially as people of color, has been truly significant. And I believe will be even more significant in the years coming.
Well, we're excited to see how that significance plays out in coming years. Now, you're in the midst of an endocrinology fellowship, and I just have to tell you, I've always thought that endocrinology was kind of magic. What impact do you want to have on that field when you graduate?
Yeah. I absolutely love pediatric endocrinology, and it's interesting because it wasn't something that was on my radar when I started residency, but I had exposure to it during my first year of residency and truly just fell in love with the pathways, understanding the hormonal processes that happen, but also understanding how it contributes to all of the body systems and how significant these hormone roles are. So for me, I'm really passionate about trying to share that with other people who might not necessarily understand what endocrinology is or the diversity of the pathways that you can have in endocrine, whether you want to be a researcher, whether you want to be a clinician, whether you want to be an academic clinician. There are just so many different pathways within the field. And one of my goals is to just promote that, just to promote the diversity of the different types of pathology that you'll see and the very real ways that you can be active in endocrinology. I'm also interested in health equity and ensuring that our patients have appropriate access to cares and trying to understand the barriers in whatever treatment or care processes are going on. One of my focuses right now is actually looking at puberty and any sort of racial disparities in who is being treated for early puberty, looking at referral practices, looking at the treatment trajectory, and seeing if there's any sort of differences there that we can hopefully alleviate to just ensure that we're standardizing the process of care for early puberty. Other big things in endocrinology from an equity standpoint are things in diabetes management. So diabetes is a very prevalent condition. Many children have it, and there are so many new advancements in how we take care of diabetes now, including diabetes technology. So access to insulin and access to insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors. And I think one of the biggest focuses is just ensuring that, again, we have equitable care and access to all of these newer things all across the board for all children with diabetes. And so those are things that I'm passionate about, and I hope to continue making a big part of my career. And also just recruiting to the pediatric endocrine workforce. There is definitely a shortage of pediatric endocrinologists, a shortage of pediatricians in general. If you look at the data, we have less people entering pediatric residencies this year. And I think it's a testament to several things going on, but one of them just being salary and reimbursement and ensuring that you are paying these providers what they deserve because of the hard work they're doing in ensuring the health of our next generation, our children. So those are all things that I'm passionate about and hope to continue having some sort of role in advocating for within my endocrinology career.
Well, there's so much there that you talked about how much you love and are passionate and fueled by your profession. But we always like to challenge our Pathways guests with naming the one thing that you absolutely love about being a pediatrician.
Ooh. What I love about being a pediatrician, gosh, the patients. And I know that's cliche, but my patients are so fun and they're so vulnerable in the sense of there's a sense of resilience, but they are so innocent. They're curious. They're funny. They keep me laughing. And I think it's refreshing because I think medicine and healthcare is hard. You work very long days. Sometimes you feel like you're not compensated or you feel underappreciated. And I think in pediatrics, particularly, those bonds that you form with those patients are really crucial. For me, it's something that helps me to fill my cup. I also have a lot of joy in just being sometimes the first Black physician that my patients have. I think, and it's something that's come up quite a bit where they will mention it. Oh, you're a doctor? We've never had a Black doctor before. Little Black girls look at me like, oh my gosh, you're the doctor, coming up to me, holding on my arm, like I'm their big sister. And I think for me, when I have those interactions, it shows me that I'm really more than a doctor in those particular moments. One of them was like, can you be my mentor? Serving as just a source of inspiration, motivation. One patient told me, oh, you're a doctor? I want to be a doctor too. I think for me, that is the most fulfilling part of it all. Knowing that I'm having an impact, not even just from a health perspective for my children, but also just from a wellness perspective. Knowing that they trust me, knowing that they feel comfortable to reach out to me, knowing that I will be able to relate to them on a different level, just from my own shared experiences. So that to me has been also a very meaningful part of being a pediatrician, just those interactions with my patients.
Well, Dr. Chineze Ebo, it has been delightful interacting with you today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
To learn more about Dr. Ebo or to hear other pathways to pediatrics, visit our website at aap.org/podcast. That's it for today's episode. If you like Pediatrics on Call, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and help us spread the word. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Pediatrics on Call.
Pediatrics on Call is a production of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our producer and editor is Ann Johnsos. Our audio engineer is Doug Nagel. Joe Puskars is our associate producer, and Susan Martin is our executive producer. Our theme music was composed by Matthew Simonson. We're taking a quick break for the holidays, but we'll be back in January.
With, you guessed it, a new edition of First Up. I'm Dr. David Hill.
And I'm Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. Thanks for listening.